This is Jim Williams with the Hurricane City Tropical Update for August 20th around 7:30 p.m. Well, we're watching newly formed Hurricane Danny out in the mid-Atlantic, and here is the HurTrack program showing the future forecast track of the system, taking it into the northern Leeward Islands as a tropical storm right over the island of Antigua, which is, by the way, the current feature at Hurricane City. And then it takes it towards Puerto Rico and in the general direction of Hispaniola. Now the question is this system going to survive the mountainous terrain? Is it even going to survive getting into the Caribbean? Because there's so much wind shear and dry air out in front of Hurricane Danny that the system may struggle to survive. I'm going to show you some satellite images of the system. In fact, let me go ahead and do that right now and show you the actual floater loop of our system, and I'll get to the water vapor imagery in just a minute. Here is a close-up of Hurricane Danny, and you can see earlier today there was an eye visible, a pinhole eye. This is a very small system. I'll show you some pictures of how small this system is. 10-mile wide area of hurricane force winds. That's how small this is. And you can see that this evening the darkest colors in the color enhanced satellite image have slowly disappeared, and the eye is closing up. So this may either be a diurnal phase where the system is basically weakening during the evening hours and then regenerating in the early morning hours. We'll have to see if that happens. Or is this a permanent weakening trend that's taking place right now? Well, let's go back to the other source here and show you the pressure map from the operational data from the climate NCEP. And what this map is showing you is the pressures in the on the entire globe. And if you notice over here to the right of the image where my mouse pointer is, the yellows and the greens are above average pressures in the Atlantic Basin. In my last update video I talked about how that's relatively unfavorable for development. But what I failed to mention was that also when you have above average anomalies of pressures in the basin, or in any basin, you're going to end up with a little bit of smaller systems, especially in the Atlantic Basin. And if you look at how small Hurricane Danny is, it's a direct relation to the above average pressures in the Atlantic Basin, and that usually spins out smaller systems. Smaller systems are vulnerable to fluctuations in intensity. They can become major hurricanes in a hurry, or they can come apart real fast as well. So that's what we're seeing here with above normal sea surface pressures of a smaller system overall. And that's not to say that every system is going to be small this year in the Atlantic Basin, but generally you're going to have smaller than average systems in a higher pressure environment. But just to tell you how small this system really is, here's a picture of Danny next to Hurricane Wilma from 2005. I mean, you could practically fit Danny inside of the eye of Hurricane Wilma. So it's definitely a small system. But let's talk about what the future holds for this system. And here it is using the University of Wisconsin shear maps. You can see that there's increasing wind shear out in front of Danny. So this system is going to be heading into a wall of shear. And I almost hesitated not to do a video this evening because the original video I did from the 16th was spot on with the wind shear and the model data that I was showing you of how this would evolve. The system would have a chance to develop in the mid-Atlantic, and then when it gets near the Caribbean Sea, it's going to lose the favorable environment, and basically the wheels are going to come off this system as it approaches the Caribbean Sea. But these orange swath of winds here are 30 to 40 knots of wind shear out in front of this system. Now it's in decline at the moment, but when Danny moves in towards the wind shear, even though the shear will be less at that time, it's still going to be southwesterly wind shear over a very small hurricane, which should eventually weaken the system, and it may happen very fast. And I even mentioned in the other update video and on Twitter for the last several days that this could actually end up being an exposed low-level circulation as it approaches the northeast Caribbean Sea. This could be decoupled from the main ball of convection, and the center out runs out in front of the system and heads towards the islands and leaving all the convection behind. That we could very well see that with Hurricane Danny. Here is the rest of the basin. Here is Danny off to the left, and we have another wave right behind this, which a few models want to indicate that this is going to develop right behind Danny and could eventually be a threat for the western Atlantic basin and maybe towards Bermuda. That's what some of the models are indicating. I'm really not buying this scenario just yet because it seems like there's quite a distance between Danny and what's coming off the coast of Africa, and for something to develop that quickly behind Danny, we'll have to see if that happens. But look, notice all the tropical waves over Africa. They're lined up like a train, and they're coming. So we're going to have a long height of the hurricane season here for the next couple of months, watching waves come off the African coast. Now you might want to wonder, what is the best performing model right now? And that is the COTC model, which is the Navy Regional Hurricane Model. And this has been, over the past several days, the best performer overall, only about 66 nautical miles off on average on Danny. So decided to pull the track up on the COTC model, and it does indicate that it's going to brush just northeast of the northern Leeward Islands and begin to make a little bit of a turn to the right. But again, the most reliable model, global models, the Euro and the GFS, which I'm going to show you in just a minute, are taking this a little bit further west than that. But this is the best performer. Just wanted to show you that. So let's go ahead and show you the current situation right now. This is the European model, and this is using the Weather Online UK site. And we'll go out about 24 hours, and you'll see that the system is moving towards the northern Caribbean Sea. And here we are going out to Sunday. You see it's approaching the northeastern Caribbean Sea, and then at 96 hours, which would be going into Monday, it weakens pretty much practically to an open wave, maybe a depression or a very weak tropical storm going over the northeastern Caribbean Sea. And then if we go out 5 days, and this is going out to Tuesday, it kind of gets lost in the Caribbean Sea. But look what's right behind it, and we have that system I was just telling you about coming off the coast of Africa that's going to try to develop and then move in the same general direction as Danny did, but maybe a little bit further north. Now let's go out 144 hours. You see that also clips the northeastern Caribbean Sea and then goes north of Puerto Rico, and then it basically falls apart. We lose that system as well, but then there it is. It pops up northeast of the Bahamas, going out to the 29th, and then right around the end of the month, the 30th, there we have a system that could be a hurricane moving off to the north. Again, these 10-day models, I hate them because you can never, if you quote a 10-day model, you're going to have egg on your face more often than not, and that's often the case at 10-day models. But this is what the European is showing. Now let's go to the GFS and go to the current situation with the GFS. Here is Hurricane Danny out in the mid-Atlantic, and let's go out about 72 hours, which would be going into Sunday the 23rd, and there we have a weak low northeast of the Caribbean Sea. And then let's go out to Tuesday the 25th, and we have this system sitting just east of Puerto Rico as a very weak system, maybe a depression, maybe a very weak tropical storm. And then we go out to the 26th, and we can see again the GFS loses the system as well, south in the Caribbean Sea, just south of Hispaniola. But here's that system that was right behind Danny, just north of Puerto Rico. And then we go out to the 27th, and that's kind of getting washed up in the Bahamas here. We go out to the 29th, and there's basically nothing on the map. Let's go a little further. Still nothing on the map. So the GFS is losing the system behind Danny. The European wants to develop the system behind Danny, but both the GFS and the Euro weaken Danny as it interacts with land and deals with the wind shear in the northeastern Caribbean Sea. All right, wanted to put one more thing I want to show you is the wind shear map from also from University of Wisconsin here, and you can see that the indications are that the wind shear is going to be increasing this area of Aqua, or winds around 15 to 20 knots of wind shear that Danny is going to be moving into. So this is pretty much of a foregone conclusion at this point. Danny's going to be dealing with wind shear. We're not going to have a strengthening hurricane coming near the Caribbean. It's going to be in a weakening phase, And by the way, the current feature is Antigua at Hurricane City, and the countdown clock is activated, but the countdown clock might be deactivated if this system continues to weaken, and it may not be even a tropical storm by the time it gets near the Caribbean Sea. I wanted to put a shout out to a couple of people this evening. First is Perry Williams. Some of you may know Perry. He goes way back to the old days on the internet of Storm 96, and you know, I'm not sure if he goes back quite that far, but back in the old days we communicated mainly on message forums and whatnot. In the early days of Hurricane City, Perry and I would communicate back and forth via message boards and chat rooms and all kinds of stuff, but he's been dealing with cancer, and he had to have a leg amputated. But yet there he is, still posting about Hurricane Danny out in the mid-Atlantic. He's been prolific on Twitter, and he's pretty good at forecasting, by the way, so I agree with him most of the time on what he says. But I just wish Perry the best of luck battling this situation he's dealing with, and to have his mind focused on the tropics. My hat's off to you, bud. A really good job doing your forecasting considering the situation you're under. You can follow Perry at Bionic Storm Chaser on Twitter, at Bionic Storm Chaser. Also want to put a shout out to Bobby Storm. She's been on the internet forever. Another one that goes way back to the old days of Storm 96 and the early days of Hurricane City. And Bobby, her and I, we talk all the time, you know, on the internet and in private about hurricanes and tracking and everything, and she really knows her stuff. If you go to her blog, you can follow her at Bobby Storm on Twitter, and she's always posting her blog on there, and she really has a good sense of what's happening downstream with the tropics, and she even picks up on systems that a lot of us aren't even paying attention to because we're focused on another storm, and she's pretty good at picking up patterns and whatnot, and puts videos in her blog, and it's really entertaining, her blog. So check her out, again, at Bobby Storm on Twitter. All right, let me switch sources one more time and go to the satellite of the vapor loop, because I want to show you something interesting in the vapor loop. And the Hurricane Danny is dealing with wind shear and dry air, or it's going to in the next few days, for one simple reason. We have what I described in my last update video, the tut out here, a series of upper level lows in the North Atlantic that's causing all this wind shear. And I'm going to show you real quickly. We have 1, 2, 3 upper level lows, and all these lows cause this wind to be out of the west, and it keeps this dry slot in place, which is feeding into Hurricane Danny. So these upper level lows are causing a lot of problems for Hurricane Danny. They're going to continue to do so as it runs into the knife here in the Caribbean Sea. So not looking real good for Danny, except for one thing, and that is when this system gets somewhere in the western Caribbean Sea over here, there may be a chance where a trough is coming. In fact, there's one more image I wanted to show you on the other shot here. Let me go back to that. And let me show you this one image of from the National Weather Service. And here it is. Going out to the 27th of August, you can see Danny is a remnant low over eastern Cuba, but there's a front that is stalled out over North Florida, and that could prevent, or allow rather, whatever remnants is of Danny to linger somewhere in the Bahamas or around the Greater Antilles, maybe down in the Northwest Caribbean Sea. It's a little early to tell. Again, I hate it when people ask me about 10-day model runs and what do I think is going to happen 2 weeks down the road. I just don't like to speculate on what could happen for anybody in the Gulf of Mexico or the eastern seaboard with this system way out in the middle of the Atlantic. But there is a possibility that Danny could, the remnants of it could linger around somewhere in the western Atlantic and maybe regenerate down the road. We'll have to see if that happens. It all depends on what happens behind Danny with the other system. But anyway, that's it for now. I'll be back with another update in several days, and I may write a blog on what's going to happen with Danny as it approaches the northeastern Caribbean Sea. Anyway, that's it for now. Thank you for watching this video and visiting Hurricane City. Thank you.